So this is the fourth and last course on interpolation. And this course will be devoted to application to the topic of integer-valued entire function of exponential type. So I speak of arithmetic application of the three first courses. And I will start with a survey on integer-valued entire function of exponential type. And to start with, I will explain the connection with transcendental number theory. And after that, I will give a few new results, and I will explain how the proof can be obtained from what I explained on interpolation. An integer-valued entire function is an entire function, so analytic in the complex plane, which takes integer values at all the non-negative integers. And the basic example is 2 exponential z. A Hurwitz function is an entire function with derivative of any order taking integer value at 0. An example is exponential of z. So here we take the values at the integers, and here we take the derivative at 0. And the topic of integer-valued entire function is to give low bounds for the growth of such functions when they are not polynomials, which means that they are transcendental entire functions. And so I start with the connection with the transcendental number theory. This connection comes from Hilbert's seventh problem in 1900. Hilbert asked 23 problems in his lecture in Paris in 1900. And the seventh problem is a problem on transcendental numbers. And in this problem, he asked whether the two numbers exponential of pi and 2 power square root of 2 are transcendental or not. He asked more generally the transcendence of numbers of the form alpha to the beta when alpha and beta are algebraic. So I already said in the very first lecture at the beginning that a transcendental number is a number which is not algebraic, and an algebraic number is a root of a polynomial with rational coefficients. So this problem was open in 1900, and the values that Hilbert considered are exponential of pi, which is 1 plus pi square over 2 plus and so on, and 2 power square root of 2. The exponential function takes some values which are transcendental, and the basic example is e, exponential of 1, which is a transcendental number as was shown by Hermite in 1873. Of course, the exponential function takes also rational values. If you take exponential of log 2, you get 2, and exponential of I pi is -1. So we have to know when the exponential function takes algebraic values or transcendental values. I mentioned the work of Hermite in 1873 that the number E is transcendental. This is really a fundamental paper, and I would say that essentially all the results which are known on transcendental values of the exponential function are based on the work of Hermite. Of course, there have been a lot of further development, and many new tools have been introduced, but the basic ideas are the ones which occur in the paper by Hermite on the exponential function in 1873 in several parts which are published in the compte rendu de l'Académie des sciences de Paris, and they are collected in his œuvre. For the problem of Hilbert, you can read in the book by Constance Reid on Hilbert some interesting fact that Hilbert gave a lecture in 1919, so 19 years after he asked the problem. He gave a lecture in Göttingen, and Carl Ludwig Siegel was attending this lecture. In this lecture, Hilbert mentioned 3 problems in number theory. The first problem that he mentioned was Riemann hypothesis. The second was Fermat's law theorem. And the third one was part of his seventh problem, which is the transcendence of 2 power square root of 2. And Hilbert said that given the recent progress, he hoped to see the proof of the Riemann hypothesis in his lifetime. And this did not happen. The Riemann hypothesis is still unsolved. Fermat's problem required totally new method, and possibly the youngest members of the audience would like to see it solved. In fact, it was solved at the end of the 20th century, but probably nobody who was in the audience could see the proof because Ludwig Siegel passed away just in the 80s. And as for 2 power square root of 2, Hilbert said that no one in the lecture would like to see the proof. And in fact, he was wrong because Siegel saw the proof, and Siegel, in fact, contributed to the proof. And what is interesting is where did the ideas of the proof came from? They came partly from the work of Hermite, but this was not sufficient because Hermite's argument were able to deal with the values of the exponential function at an algebraic point, exponential of alpha, and this was done by Lindemann when alpha is irrational, and by Hermite when alpha is rational. And for 2 to the square root of 2, the exponent is square root of 2 log 2, which is not an algebraic number, so the method of Hermite is not sufficient, and some new ideas were necessary. And these new ideas came from the study of integer-valued entire function. This is the connection which I want to make. Polya started this topic in 1915. He studied integer-valued entire function where you take the points which are the non-negative integers. And Gelfand generalized it to the Gaussian integers, z of I. The result of Polya is that an entire function which is not a polynomial and satisfies f of a is in z for all non-negative integers a grows at least like 2 power z. The exact result that he had is that the lim sup of 1 over r log fr is at least log 2, which means that the type of the exponential type of f has to be at least log 2. I used the same notation as in the previous courses. Fr is the sup of f on the disk of radius r. So this was the seminal work of Polya, and it was extended by Fukasawa in 1928 and by Gelfand in 1929. I would say that this looks a little bit like a kind of exercise that we give to the students. Something is known for the integers. We ask whether it's true for the Gaussian integers, and the answer is yes. And the conclusion is that if a function is not a polynomial, an entire function, and takes integer values, integer means now in z of I, for all the integer points in z of I, then it grows at least like exponential cz square, which means that it is a function of order at least 2. It's not the type now which is involved, it is the order. More precisely, what Gelfand proved is that 1 over r squared log fr is at least gamma. So we would say that it's not exponential type, but it's the exponential of the square, but for the growth r square, for the order 2, we have the Le bond for alpha gamma. And the proof of Fukasawa and Gelfand were very similar to the proof of Polya, which is to expand f of z into a Newton interpolation series at the Gaussian integers. I will give the proof of Polya a little bit later, using our friend, which is the Lagrange interpolation. Okay, so the result of Gelfand was with gamma, which is positive. What was important is to know that it's a positive number, but the Le bond that he had was not the one which we expect. What do we expect? First of all, we have seen in the previous courses that it's a good idea to replace integer values by 0. And we can ask, what happens if we ask a function which vanishes on z of I? And we have seen the answer in the first lecture. We take the Weierstrass sigma function, which is the canonical product, where we take an exponential of a polynomial of degree 2, and we have 1 minus z of omega for omega non-zero, and we put z here because we want also 0 to be a 0. So this is the canonical product associated with z of I. It is an entire function vanishing on z of I, and it grows like exponential pi z squared over 2. This was an exercise which I suggested in the first course. What is exactly the growth? I explained why the order has to be at least 2, but we have a precise estimate for the type, and we have more precisely that this function has the lim sup of 1 over r squared log sigma r, which is exactly pi over 2. Which means that this constant of Gelfond, which we know is larger than 10 to the minus 45, is less than pi over 2. It was not something important for the application, but it was an open problem for some time to know what is the exact value of the constant. And the finite answer was given by François Gramin in 1981, which is that the right value is gamma over 2e. But the fact that it is best possible was proved by Masser in 1980, so 1 year before. So we know exactly what is the type for this problem. What is the connection with the Hilbert's problem? The connection arises from the example of exponential of pi. Consider the f function exponential of pi z and replace z by a plus ib, where a and b are integers. The value that you get is exponential pi to the a times minus 1 to the b. If the number exponential of pi were a rational number, then these values would all be rational numbers. We are not exactly in the situation of integer valued entire function because they are rational numbers, they are not integers. But nevertheless, there is a strong connection. And if you just look at Gelfond's proof for the integer valued function on z of I, you will see that it gives the irrationality of exponential of pi. It gives even a little bit more. It gives the fact that exponential of pi is not a root of a polynomial xn minus a, where a is a rational number. But in fact, it gives much more than that. And Gelfond did that in 1929. And Gelfond obtained the fact that exponential of pi is a transcendental number. So this was the first solution, partial solution of the problem of Hilbert. After that, Gelfond was able to prove a little bit more, which is that alpha power beta is transcendental if beta is an imaginary quadratic number. The connection comes from the fact that if you take alpha equal minus 1, when I write log alpha, it means that I take one complex number such that the exponential is alpha. So there are infinitely many solutions, but you take any value of log alpha which is not 0, and alpha to the beta is exponential beta log alpha, it's transcendental. So if you take log alpha equal I pi, beta equal minus I, alpha to the beta is just exponential of pi. So Gelfond solved Hilbert's problem for imaginary quadratic exponent. So imaginary quadratic means that it is irrational of degree 2, and imaginary is that it is not real. And in the case of a real quadratic number, this was solved by Kuzmin the year after, and as a consequence, 2 power square root of 2 is a transcendental number. And in general, alpha to the beta is transcendental when beta is a quadratic number, either imaginary or real. So this was a partial solution, and the full solution came a little bit later by Gelfond and Schneider in 1934, using some ideas, some contribution of Siegel to transcendental number theory. And the final solution to Hilbert's seventh problem was obtained in 1934, which is the transcendence of alpha to the beta. And it is the same as to say that if you take two algebraic numbers, log alpha 1, log alpha 2, the quotient log alpha 1 over log alpha 2 is either rational or transcendental. So this is just the beta, and in this case, alpha 1 is alpha 2 power beta. So this is why I insist on the connection between integer valued entire function and transcendental number theory. There are further connections. In particular, in 1950, Strauss wrote a paper on interpolation and on integer-valued entire function, and he made some connection with transcendence result, in particular with the result of Lindemann on the transcendence of exponential of alpha. But at the same time, Strauss pointed out that in a footnote which was added to the proof, Schneider pointed out that some further result, Strauss pointed out that Schneider obtained further results just the year before, which gave rise to the Schneider-Lang criterion, but I will not go further into transcendental number theory. And now I will come back to the topic of integer-valued entire functions. So I gave the definition. It's a function which takes integer values at the non-negative integers. If you ask for polynomials, the basis of the ring of, or the space of integer-valued entire polynomials is given by the so-called binomial polynomials, Zn, which is z, z minus 1, z minus n plus 1 over n factorial. Which means that if you take integers ui, if you take a polynomial of this form, it's a polynomial, so the sum is finite. Then you have a function, a polynomial. The polynomial map is an integer valued map. For each integer, it takes integer values. And conversely, any polynomial which is an integer valued function is a linear combination of this polynomial. So we have the full answer for polynomials. So I told you that the result of polia is 2 to the z is the smallest entire function, which is not a polynomial, which is transcendental. The values of 2 to the z are just defined as exponential z log 2, which is given by the series which is here. So this series does not tell too much about that, but Polia proved that this is the smallest and the exponential type is 0.693. The proof of Polia starts by expanding the function f into a Newton interpolation series. We already saw that in the first course, that we have an expansion f of z equals sum of un zn, where un is given by the values of n between 0 and n, the n minus k. So this is un, which means that if f of n is an integer for all n, the coefficients are integers. So this is the Newton interpolation. In particular, if f does not grow too fast, then for sufficiently large n, the coefficients un are less than 1, and therefore un will be equal to 0, and f will be a polynomial. So this is what I would like to explain, that if f does not grow too fast, and it will mean, in fact, that f has a type which is less than log 2, then we have un which is less than 1. For the proof, so we will use a Laplace transform, and for that we start by the following remark. If we have an integer capital N, we can write exponential of nt as exponential of t minus 1 plus 1 with the exponent n. And therefore, this is the sum for k equals 0 up to n of exponential of t minus 1 with the exponent n. And then we have the binomial coefficient, which is nk. Well, okay, it's n here. So this is just the binomial coefficient, which gives this expansion here. And if you have t in modulus which is less than 2, then exponential of t minus 1 is bounded by exponential of t minus 1. The modulus is here. And so exponential of t minus 1 is less than 1, because t is less than log 2. So this is where the log 2 occurs. It's because of this upper bound, which is here. Now, we deduce something. We deduce that in the sum, which is here, we can look at the sum for n equals 0 to infinity. And we have nn, and then exponential of t minus 1 to the n. So we replace capital N by infinity. This sum is convergent if exponential of t minus 1 is of modulus less than 1, and in particular, if t is less than log 2. If you look at this function as a function of t, then, excuse me, this will be z. I put z like this. We have a function of two variables, z and t. And if you look at this function for z equal n, f of capital N, you have the sum which is above, because all the terms which are greater than n will give 0 here. And therefore, well, in this expansion, we will have 0, and therefore, well, no, more precisely, in this expansion, we will have the expression which is here, which is exponential nt. So for all n greater than or equal to 0. So the difference between this function and this one vanishes at all the non-negative integers. But this is a function which is of exponential type, and the type is t, it is less than log 2. And we have seen that a function which has a type less than 1, this was a consequence of Jensen formula, which vanishes at all the integers is 0. And we have seen even better, which is the result of Carlson. If the exponential type is less than pi, then the function is 0. So the difference between the f of z and exponential of tz is the 0 function. So f of z is exponential of tz. So once we have this formula, we use the Laplace transform. We take an entire function of exponential type less than log 2. We take a r which is between tau and log 2, and we write the Laplace transform of f. This is this integral, but at the same time, we can expand it into this interpolation series, because the interpolation series converges. And what is un? By using the Laplace transform, well, this un is just this integral, and therefore, the un which is here is bounded for sufficiently large n by r, which is the length of the circle, and then you have fr and exponential r minus 1 n, which is less than 1, for n sufficiently large. Again, because exponential r minus 1 is less than 1. And so this gives un equals 0 if un is an integer, and this completes the proof of Polya. You will get more information on this paper by Gérard Rosy in the Séminaire de théorie des nombres de Bordeaux, which is available on the internet. The result of Polya was a little bit more precise than the one which I explained here, because it's not only that we can get the result even if the exponential type is log 2, but we need a little bit better than 2 to the minus r. What we need is square root of r 2 to the minus r fr. The limit of this should be positive. And this is the same as to say that if the limit is 0, then f is a polynomial. So it is the limit of square root of r 2 to the minus r fr. So this is slightly sharper than to say that we assume that the exponent type is less than 2. If you compare with Carlson result, which I just used in this proof here, for Polya, we need an exponential type less than log 2. For Carlson, we need an exponential type less than pi. So this is less restrictive. But for Carlson, we assume that all the values are 0. And for Polya, we assume only that the values are integers. But the two results are similar to a certain extent, apart from pi replaced by log 2 and 0 replaced by the integers. Polya's result was improved by Hardy, who got the following result. If an integer valued entire function at the limit of 2 to the minus r fr equals 0, then f is a polynomial. this is best possible because for f of z equal 2 to the z, you have the limit which is equal to 1. And so it's difficult to imagine that we can go further. You can compare with Polya's assumption, which is that the limit of square root of r, 2 to the minus r is 0. So this assumption is much stronger. So we could say that we are at the end of the theory for this question, but in mathematics, to say that a result is best possible does not mean that it's not possible to improve it. And this is what happened with the result of Polya. In 1941, so much later, Zellberg proved that if an integer-valued entire function satisfies tau less than log2 plus some epsilon, which is 1 over 1,500, then f is of the form p0 plus p1 of z 2 to the z, where p0 and p1 are polynomials. So you see, it's interesting because he went further, but also he got all the solution for the type which is slightly bigger than log2, and p0 and p1 are polynomials, but it's easy to see that they are polynomials with rational coefficients, and therefore you have only finitely, countably many such functions which satisfy this condition. Again, this is an improvement, but it's not the end of the story. After that, Piso was able to assume only that the exponential type is 0.8, which is much larger than the log2 plus 1 over 1,500. And then, in this case, he gives the solution to the problem, which are the function a polynomial plus 2 to the z times a polynomial plus gamma power z p2 plus gamma bar to the z p3. P0, P1, P2, P3 are polynomial with rational coefficients, and gamma bar, these are the two non-real roots of the polynomial z cubed minus 3z plus 3. This polynomial has one real root and two non-real roots, and you get like this all the integer-valued entire function of type less than 0.8. And so this is stronger than Zellberg's result, and Piso went further, and he went almost up to the exponential type less than 1. I am not sure that this is the end of the story, but this is the end of the story which I am going to tell today. And I will, at least for integer-valued entire function, I would like to go to something which is similar, which is completely integer-valued entire function. And now, instead of taking the non-negative integers, we take all the integers. So we ask a function which takes value in z for all points in z, positive and negative. And I give an example of such a function. Of course, you have the sine of pi z, which satisfies this, but we want a function which grows more slowly. And for that, you can do the following. You take a quadratic unit. A unit means that it is a root of a polynomial where the leading term is 1 and the constant coefficient is plus or minus 1. So I take plus 1, but it does not make too much difference. So I take u, which is a real number. It's a real quadratic number, but it is a root of such a polynomial with some a in z. And I assume that it is quadratic, so I assume that this polynomial is irreducible. And I look at the two functions which are here, u to the z plus u to the minus z, and u to the z minus u to the minus z over u minus 1. You see that if you take an integer, n, either positive or negative, these two functions will take integer values. So what I say that for n in z, u to the n plus u to the minus n is an integer for u which satisfies this. This is not difficult to see. U to the n plus u to the minus n, u is a solution of a quadratic polynomial, which is written here. So u to the n is also a quadratic number, u to the minus n also, it's a quadratic number. And in fact, they are in the same field, so this is a quadratic number, it's a root of a polynomial of degree 2. But so there are two roots to this polynomial. What is the other root? It's easy to see that it's obtained by replacing u by u minus 1, so it's the same. So the polynomial of degree 2, which vanishes there, has a double root. And so this double root has to be a rational number. And because we have taken units, this is an integer. So this is an integer for all n in Z. And it is the same for the other one, u to the z minus u to the minus z over u to minus u minus 1. If you replace z by minus z, you get the same value. Well, you get a value which is in the same set. So these two functions are completely integer valued entire function. And what is the exponential type? Well, u to the z is the exponential z of log u. U is greater than 1, so the exponential type is log u. So it's interesting if we find a u which is as small as possible, which is a root of some unit like this. And for that, you take the polynomial x cubed minus 3x plus 1. The u is 3 plus square root of 5 over 2. And the inverse is 3 minus square root of 5 over 2. And then you get an integer valued, well, two of them, in fact, integer valued entire functions of exponential log u, which is the logarithm of this number. I have a quiz, and I will not give the solution during this course, but you should find the solution easily. It's an exercise, which is the following. You take the golden ratio, phi, which is a root of x squared minus x minus 1. So it's a real number greater than 1. Phi tilde is minus phi minus 1. This is the other root of this polynomial. And if you take any integer n, phi to the n plus phi tilde to the n is an integer. And now the logarithm of phi is less than log 2. So you have a function which is phi to the z plus phi tilde to the z, which takes integer valued at all the integers, including the positive integers. And so why isn't it a counterexample to Polya's result on the growth of transcendental integer valued entire functions? So this is a question, and I will not give the solution, but I come back to the example which I gave before. The function which is here is a completely integer valued transcendental entire function. And the result of Carlson in 1929, the same Carlson as I mentioned just before, is that if the type of a completely integer valued entire function is less than the type of this function here, so it is 0.962, then f is a polynomial. Selberg completed the result of Carlson by taking this type plus an epsilon, which is now 2 divided by 1000, and then he proved that 1 million, and then he proved that f is of the form which is written here, so it's a generalization of what he did before with the result of Polya. Okay, so far I studied the functions and I took the values at the integers, either positive or all the integers. I come back to the second topic, which is Hurwitz function. Now, instead of taking the values at the integers, we should take the derivatives at 1 point, and we will take 0. A Hurwitz function is an entire function so that all the derivatives at 0 are integers for all n greater than or equal to 0. So when we had the integer valued entire function, we had an expansion which was given by the binomial polynomials. Now we have an expansion which is given by the polynomials Zn divided by n factorial. These are the polynomials which are Hurwitz functions. They are just finite sums of Zn, finite linear combination with integer coefficients of Zn divided by n factorial. And of course, the exponential function is a transcendental Hurwitz function of exponential type 1, by definition of the exponential type. We have Hurwitz function by taking exponential of az, where a is an integer, and the exponential type now is the absolute value of a. A result similar to the result of Polya. Polya was in 1915, and now it is in 1916. Kakeya proved that the Hurwitz function of exponential type less than 1 is a polynomial. So it's very similar. Instead of log 2, now we have 1. And the precise result of Kakeya was that Hurwitz function for which the lim sup of square root of r exponential minus r fr equals 0 is a polynomial. So you see, it's very similar to what was the situation with Polya earlier. And so it's natural to ask whether this square root of r is superfluous or not. Polya assumption was with the square root of r, and Hardy removed the square root of r. And now we have the square root of r here, so we can ask, is it possible to remove it? That would mean that the exponential of z is the smallest Hurwitz function, and we could expect to have something like Hardy, an expansion of the Hurwitz function which have exponential type less than 1 plus 1 over 1000. So the assumption of Kakeya is that the limit sup is 0. This was refined by Polya himself in 1921, and instead of lim sup equals 0, he assumed only that the lim sup is less than 1 over square root of 2 pi. So this does not give exactly the answer to my question, but the answer is given by Polya also. This is best possible. So we cannot remove the square root of r, which is here. And the fact that it is best possible comes from the fact that if you take a lacunary series, which is like the exponential, z capital N divided by capital N factorial, lacunary means that you take only the capital N which are power of 2, and the En will be 1 or minus 1. It's an exercise which I leave to you to check that this function has the lim sup of square root of r exponential minus r fr equal 1 over square root of 2 pi. This proves that we have now uncountably many functions which satisfy this condition here. So this is quite different from the situation with the integer valued entire function, where because of the result of Hardy and then Piso, we had only countably many functions. Now we have uncountably many functions. Why do we have this expression here? It comes from the fact that if you look at z to the 2n, so it's z to the 2n divided by 2n factorial. Well, you can write this as z capital N divided by capital N factorial, and capital N is 2 power n. Because the series is lacunary, when you look at fr, you have at most one term which will come into the picture to estimate fr, and this term will occur if r is close to n. Because what you want to do is to compare z to the n, so let me say r to the n divided by n factorial. You want to compare that with fr, so this is essentially fr, and you want to see what is how it behaves with respect to square root of r exponential of r. So if r is equal to n, you see that this will be n to the n divided by n factorial, and this is essentially n to the n divided n factorial. Because of the Stirling formula, it is n to the n exponential of n divided by square root of 2 pi n. But I have taken r equal n, and so this will give exactly the quantity which occurs here. 1 over square root of 2 pi r exponential of minus r. So I leave the details to you. I will give a proof of the result of Polya. I gave the proof of the first result of Polya with the integer valued entire function, but I would like to give a proof which I will use later. The result which is here is the one which is the arithmetic argument for the proof of the results which I will mention at the end, which are the arithmetic results related to Lidstone, Whittaker, and other interpolation formula. So we are interested with this statement. we have an entire function f, we have a real number a, which is non-negative. A equals 0 will be a useful case. And we assume that the lim sup of exponential minus r square root of r f r is less than exponential minus a over square root of 2 pi. If you take a equals 0, you get just the assumption that we had before, which is 1 over 2 pi, which is here. The conclusion is that there exists n0 so that for n sufficiently large, n greater than n0, and for all z in the disk modulus of z less than a, we have the derivative of order n at this point z, which is less than 1. In particular, if these numbers are rational integers, then they are 0, 0. So this statement is sufficient for the result of Polya, which I mentioned just before. I will give the proof of the result which is here. The proof will rest on Cauchy's inequality. And Cauchy's inequality that I gave before in the first course is f of z is less than or equal to n factorial divided by r to the n. And then we have f on the disk r plus z. So the modulus of z is less than a, so the z here we can replace it by a, and I will take r plus a equal n, and so this gives n factorial divided by r, which is n minus a. N tends to infinity, so n is greater than a, power n, and then we have the assumption which is above, which is exponential minus a divided by square root of 2 pi. And we have on the left-hand side exponential of r, which is exponential of a minus, so exponential of r, n minus a. And we have the square root of r, so square root of n minus a. So we look at what happens when n tends to infinity, and n minus a to the n is n to the n times 1 minus a over n to the n. So the limit of this is exponential of a, so it's a constant, it does not depend on n. And now we have the n factorial, which is n to the n, exponential of minus n, square root of 2 pi n. And so the square root of 2 pi n just matches with this one, and the n to the n comes from here. And so at the end, we have the exponential of n, and because the exponential of a cancelled here, we see that this will be less than 1 as soon as n is sufficiently large. Okay, so this is the sketch of the proof. I should have said the limit sup is strictly less than this number. So because it is strictly less, I can say that we have a 1 minus epsilon for n sufficiently large. So I should put 1 minus epsilon here in such a way that it becomes less than 1 when n is large. We can say something much more precise for this question here. Sato and Strauss went further by giving a result which is extremely sharp, because the assumption, they prove that for any epsilon, there exists a transcendental Hurwitz function, which is a lacunary series like the one which I mentioned, where the limit sup of square root of 2 pi r exponential minus r, 1 plus epsilon over 24r minus 1 fr is less than 1. So there exists transcendental function like this, and every Hurwitz function for which the limit sup with minus instead of plus fr is less than 1 is a polynomial. So this is really very sharp for this problem here. Okay, to go further, I would like to consider some generalization. At the same time, generalization of integer valued function and Hurwitz function. And to give a picture of what we are going to do, we display horizontally the rational integers and vertically the derivatives. So these are the integers, and these are the derivatives. Integer valued function, this is horizontal, and Hurwitz function, it is vertical. So how to get something more general? There are several ways to do that, and we will consider several ways. We can go horizontally. Instead of taking the values, we take the values and some derivative, for example, one derivative or two derivatives. And this is the horizontal way of expanding, going further. And we define a k times integer valued function. It is an entire function so that the k first derivative at the integers are integers. So this is a k times integer valued entire function. We can go vertically. We consider entire function where all the derivatives at finitely many points take integer values. For example, at 2 points instead of Hurwitz function, which is at 1 point. So we define a k-point Hurwitz function, which is an entire function having all its derivatives at 0, 1, k minus 1, which take integer values. This is the definition I take. We could take k points, z0, z1, zk minus 1, but I take the integers here. Okay, so k times integer valued function, horizontal, you have here the picture for k equal 2. You take the values and the derivative. And Gelfond studied that, and the result is that a k times integer valued function of exponential type less than k times logarithm is a polynomial. So you see the condition is just on the type. The order is still 1, but it is the exponential type. So this is the result for k times integer valued function. That it is essentially best possible is due to the fact that the function sine pi z to the power k, it has an exponential type k pi, and it vanishes with multiplicity k on z. So this is essentially the result which can be expected, but it's probably not the end of the story. For 2 points Hurwitz function, so we go vertically. I give here the picture when you take 0 and 1, and you take all the derivatives at 0 and 1. There is a result of Sato in 1971 that every 2-point Hurwitz entire function for which has a growth which is less than exponential of r squared is a polynomial. So you see that now we work with the order. The order has to be essentially less than 2. And Sato proved also that there exists transcendental 2-point Hurwitz entire function which have an order which is at most 2, but instead of minus r, there is plus r here. And there is also the minus log r. So this is rather sharp, but this is only for 2 points, 0 and 1. For k greater than or equal to 3, we do not have a good information. What Sato proved is that if you take a k-point Hurwitz function, so all the derivatives at 0, 1, k are integers, then the order has to be at least k. And this is best possible, and now you take the function exponential z, z minus 1, z minus k plus 1. This is a function of order k, and at all the points 0, 1, k, the Taylor expansion has integer coefficients divided by the factorial. We would like to know more, like in the case of 2-point Hurwitz function. And for that, I will define the type with respect to the order rho. For a function of order less than rho, tau rho of f is the lim sup of log fr divided by r to the rho. If you take rho equal 1, this is the exponential type. But now rho will be greater than 1, it will be a positive integer. So this type tau rho means that f grows like exponential tau z to the rho. So it's the exponential of something which grows much further than the z. An example is the function exponential z, z minus 1, z minus k plus 1. The order is k, and the type with respect to the order k is 1. It grows like exponential z to the k. So this is the definition. And now we ask what is this type tau of f for a function f which is a k-point Hurwitz entire function. And Weber-Bach stated the following result. If f is over the rho and is a k-point Hurwitz entire function, then either rho is greater than k or rho equal k and the type is at least 1, which looks rather natural compared to the example that we have. But Weber-Bach stated that, but he did not give a proof, and in fact Sato pointed out that the result is not true, which is a little bit surprising. And the example of Sato is the following. You take the polynomial 1/2 of z, z minus 1, z minus 2, z minus 3. You can expand, and if you expand it, you see that you have rational coefficients because of the 1/2, but the denominator is just 2, and the denominator 2 occurs only when the exponent is even, z4 and z squared. As a consequence, if you take the derivative of a, then the coefficients become integers. If you take the first derivative, but of course after that all the derivatives have the same property. And therefore, if you take the function exponential of a of z, it is a k-point Hurwitz function, because you have the point 0, 1, 2, 3. It is transcendental. The order is 4, which is to be expected. But the type with index 4 is only 1/2, because you have the 1/2 here. And so the result of Weber-Bach is not true, and we do not know what is the truth in this case. The next step, instead of going horizontally or vertically, we can go both, horizontally and vertically. And this is the so-called utterly integer-valued entire function. So it's another way of mixing the horizontal and vertical generalization. We ask for functions which are entire, and such that all the derivatives at all the integers are integers in Z. So this is the picture. You have just the grid, if you like. It goes vertically and horizontally up to infinity. Strauss suggested that maybe they do not exist. And it was only in 1968 that Friedman showed that there exists transcendental utterly integer-valued function. But now the function has to grow much further. It is the lim sup of log fr divided by r. If you remember the definition of the order, we divide by log r, but here we divide by r. And so it means that it grows like a double exponential of pi r. And he proved that the transcendental utterly integer-valued function should satisfy that the order, well, it is a double exponential with a type, if you like, which is logarithm of 1 plus 1 over e. This log 1 plus 1 over e has been improved to log 2. So there is still some room between pi and log 2. So such a function has to grow at least like exponential of 2 to the z. Sato gave an example of transcendental entire function like exponential of alpha z, and then he constructed a non-denumerable set of utterly integer-valued entire function. I will not give the construction, but just to give some idea, it takes a series of an, the sine power n of 2 pi z. So we take the sine of 2 pi z to the power n, and the coefficient an are selected in a clever way. And you see that this function is quite explicit, apart from the fact that an are not given in a closed form. And the last way of mixing horizontally and vertically is the way that we have seen previously, which is the one of Abel. We take a diagonal like this. We take the derivative of order n at the point n. And we ask what are the entire functions f such that the derivative of order n at the point n is an integer. Abel considered that for 0, but I recall that the polynomials of Abel are given by this formula, and they have the property that any polynomial has a finite expansion like this. And I mentioned the fact that Halphen proved that such an expansion into a series which is uniformly convergent on any compact of C holds for any entire function of exponential type less than omega, where omega is defined by omega exponential of omega plus 1 equal 1. But this gives the solution for 0, and an exponential function of exponential type less than omega with this omega, which takes these values which are 0, is a polynomial. But now we are interested with the integer valued. And this was considered by Françoise Bertrand-Diaz in 1958. She was working with Piso, and she considers the function exponential of tau 0 z, which we want to be a solution of f prime of z equal f of z minus 1. If you remember, we had this differential equation with a difference, so differential difference equation. We saw it before with related with Abel interpolation problem. And if you look at this function, if tau 0 satisfies tau 0 exponential tau 0 equal 1, then the derivative is f of z minus 1. So you have exponential tau 0 z. This is f of z. F prime of z is exponential, is tau 0 exponential of tau 0 z. And so what we want is that f prime of z is f of z minus 1. So we write what is f of z minus 1 is exponential tau 0 z minus tau 0. And so if we want that both are the same, we ask that tau 0 exponential tau 0 equal 1. So this value of tau 0 is 0.56 and so on. And so this function satisfies f prime of z equal f of z minus 1. F of 0 is 1. And therefore, all the derivative of order n at the point n will take the same value, which is 1. And Françoise Bertrand-Diaz proved that an entire function of exponential type, which is less than tau 0, and such that all these numbers are integers for sufficiently large integer n, is a polynomial. It's possible to go a little bit further. If you take a number which is slightly greater than tau 0, which is 0.616, so tau 1 is a complex number which is defined by this condition, then any entire function of exponential type less than this number, 0.6, such that all the derivatives are in z, is of the form a polynomial in z plus a polynomial in z times exponential tau 0 z. So these are given a little bit like it was done by Selberg in the result that I mentioned before, and also by Hardy. There are a lot of variation on this theme. People have considered Q analogues and multiplicative versions. So we consider f of qz equal f of q, f of z to the q, or something like this. And then, or we look at the values of f at all the powers of q, which are integers. So these are the multiplicative version. There are analog in finite characteristic, which is quite interesting, but I will not give too much information on that. There are some results related with congruencies and also some generalization to several variables involving a lot of work. There are many things which have been written on several variables. But before ending this section, I would like to mention an open problem related with the work of Marcer and Gramin that I mentioned before, which was related with the theorem of Fukasawa and Gelfond. The connection is that Marcer was trying to improve the result of Fukasawa and Gelfond by using the extrapolation method with z of I and the Newton formulae. And then doing so, he found an analog of Stirling formula in 2 dimensions. And the analog is the following. For each integer k, you define rk as the radius of the smallest disk in R square that contains at least k integer lattice points. Lattice points are the elements of Z of I. We have the radius of the smallest disk. We do not say a disk centered at 0. It's any disk. We ask any disk in R square. So if we take R square, it means that the lattice points are Z square. So for each k, we have a number rk, and we ask how does grow rk? The disk of radius rk has an area which is pi rk square. So we expect that pi rk square will be roughly k. And so if you take the sum of pi rk squared minus 1, you have essentially the sum of 1 over k. And the sum of 1 over k for k equal 2 to n grows like log n. So you look at the limit when n tends to infinity, and this limit exists, and this is an absolute constant. And for this absolute constant, there was a conjecture of Gramin which gave the value a closed form for delta in terms of the L function of the field Q of I. And this conjecture was disproved by Melchior, Novak, and Zimmerman in 2013 because they were able to compute the first 4 digits of the delta. So it starts with 1819, which are on both sides, and after that here you have 7, here you have 8. So the next digit is unknown, and to compute one more digit seems to be hopeless, and to find a closed formula for delta is something which is an open problem. So I wanted to mention this problem before going to my favorite subject, which is Lidstone, Whittaker, and other interpolation. With the picture which I introduced before, the interpolation of Lidstone means that you take two derivatives, the derivatives of even order at 2 points, S0 and S1. In what I said before, I took 0 and 1. It's more convenient for what I will say now to take S0, S1. It's more general, but you make a change of variables and you reduce to 0 and 1 for the formulae which I gave in the second course. So I have 2 points S0 and S1, and for Lidstone, you have the derivative of even order. For Whittaker, we have the derivative of even order at 1 point, S1, and the derivative of odd order at the other point. So it goes like this, and this is a periodic case as well as the first one. So this is the result which I want to introduce. We have two complex numbers, S0, S1. We have an entire function such that the derivative at S0 and S1 are integers. We assume that the two numbers are not the same, they are different. And we assume that the type is sufficiently small. It is less than 1, and it is less than pi over S0 minus S1. And then the result is that if a function has all these derivatives which are in Z, then the type is less than 1. So this is best possible. I will explain why it is best possible, and then I will explain how we prove such a result. So this is the result which I repeat. Why is this best possible for the type? So as I mentioned before, when we say it's best possible, it does not mean that this is the end of the story. We can expect that some people will go further, but nevertheless, we cannot get something better than that. And the fact that the 1 cannot be replaced by something larger is the fact that the function sine hyperbolic of Z minus S1 over hyperbolic sine of S0 minus S1, this function has an exponential type 1. Because when you look at what happened when Z tends to infinity, it is essentially exponential of tau Z with tau equal 1. So the exponential type is 1. The value at S0 is 1, the value at S1 is 1, and the second derivative of f is the same as f. So all the derivative of even order at 0 and 1 are integers, 1 or 0. Now, for the second term, pi over S0 minus S1, we take another example. The other example, you see also why I take S0 and S1 other than 0 and 1, because otherwise this number is pi and we do not see what is going on. But by taking S0 and S1, it could be that the minimum is pi over S0 minus S1. And in this case, we take the function sine of pi z minus S0 over S1 minus S0. The type now is pi divided by S1 minus S0, because this is the gross coefficient of z for the sine. If you look at the derivative of even order, either at S0 or at S1, you find 0. So these are integer values, because this is 0. And this proves that we cannot get something better than the result which is here. Okay, I would like to give a sketch of the proof. And for the sketch of the proof of the result of integer valued entire function for Lidstone interpolation, we use what I proved before, which is a variant of Polya's result. And I give a corollary of the result of which I gave the proof before. If you have an entire function and a number a, such that the lim sup of exponential minus r square root of r fi is less than exponential minus a of the square root of 2 pi, then the set of n z0, where z0 is less than a and fn of z0 is a non-zero integer, is finite. Why is it so? What I proved is that for n sufficiently large, we have fn of z0, which is less than 1. So this is true for all z0, but the bound which I had for the n does not depend on z0. It was depending only on a. So this set here is a finite set. So this is a consequence of the variant which I proved before. And now I look at the situation which I want to consider. F2n of S0 is in Z, and F2n of S1 is in Z. And we have a condition on the type of this function, which is that it is less than some minimum, but in particular the type is less than 1. Exponential type is less than 1. And so when you look at the assumption which is here, this assumption is satisfied because Fr is bounded by exponential 1 minus epsilon r, and so this lim sup is 0. And so, given the assumption which is here, we deduce that the numbers f2n of S0 and f2n of S1, the set of these numbers which are not 0 is finite. So when you look at the f2n of S0 and f2n of S1, you have only finitely many of these numbers which are not 0. And therefore, there is a polynomial which has the property that the derivative of order 2n at S0, which is equal to 0, and the derivative at the point S1 is equal to this number for all n. Because for infinitely many n, we will have 0 here. And so we look at the function f minus p, and now this function vanishes at all the points, the derivative vanishes at all these points. So we call it f tilde, and we have f tilde 2n of S0 equal f tilde 2n at S1 equals 0. So we are back to the situation of the uniqueness for the interpolation problem of Lidstone, and we have solved it in the case of S0 equals 0, S1 equals 1, but we just make a change of variable, and in fact this change of variable is the part of the proof where you get the pi divided by S0 minus S1. We can do the same for Whittaker interpolation. For Whittaker interpolation, we have the derivative of even order at S1 and odd order at S0. And so the result is very similar, apart from the fact that instead of pi divided by S0 minus S1, you have pi over 2. And we have seen why we have this difference, why it is pi over 2 instead of pi. And again, this is best possible. To see that it is best possible, we give two examples. One with the exponential type 1, which is a hyperbolic sign divided of z minus s1 divided by the hyperbolic sign of cosine. This function has a second derivative which is equal to f, so it's a solution of this differential equation. And therefore, we have a function which takes the values 1 for the derivative of e odd order at s0 and 0 otherwise. And of course, we could give another example where we will have 0 here and 1 there. It's not difficult. And then another function where the exponential type is pi divided by 2s1 minus s0, and this is given by a cosine. So this is the arithmetic result for Whittaker interpolation. And we can do the same for the interpolation which I considered in the third course, which was by Poritsky and Goncharov-Abel. For Poritsky, it is this periodic case where the derivative of order multiple of m are integers now for S0, S1, S2 or more points. And the arithmetic result for Poritsky interpolation is that if you have m distinct complex numbers and an entire function of sufficiently small exponential type, if all these derivatives are in z, for all sufficiently large n and for all the j, then f is a polynomial. We can be more precise on what we mean by the sufficiently small exponential type. If we are in the case of Lidstone, the condition is something explicit that we have seen just before. And in this case, m equal 2, it is best possible. For Goncharov-Abel interpolation, we have also a similar result. We have distinct complex numbers and an entire function of sufficiently small exponential type, and we assume that for all sufficiently large n, one of the fn of sj is in z, one at least. So for each n, you have one of the derivative which is an integer. Then f is a polynomial. And we recover the result which I mentioned before for Whittaker in the case m equal 2 and in the periodic case. But in this case, we have a condition on the small exponential type which is explicit and best possible. Okay, as before, I complete by giving some references. I mentioned at the beginning a paper by Strauss where there are connections with transcendental number theory. It was published in 1950 in Annals of Mathematics. And I give 3 references. In these references, I gave this reference here for my second course, this one for the third course, and this one is a survey for which you have all the other information for the survey which I gave on integer-valued function and the Hurwitz function. Thank you very much.